Right to NBC News senior national security correspondent Courtney Kube, who was in the brief room, you can see, still in the brief room, there at the Pentagon for the news conference. Courtney, what are some of your biggest takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, we got a lot more fidelity on the strikes at Fordo, one of the facilities. Unfortunately, we didn't really hear anything about the other two facilities, but we got a little bit more fidelity. A couple things that really stood out to me about that mission itself, which we've gotten more and more detail on as the days have unfolded. Number one, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dan Kane, he laid it out exactly how the U.S. was able to see that the ventilation vents that the U.S. the U.S. military struck as part of like a more vulnerable part of the facility, that they were actually covered in concrete not too long before the military mission. They blew those off, and then they launched the additional 5 more MOPS, these massive ordnance penetrators, into the ventilation shafts to target the underground facility. Now, one thing that stood out to me is, General Kane continued to say that the actual battle damage assessment is not done by the U.S. military. In fact, that is something that's compiled by the intelligence community. He even said we don't grade our own homework here. And so he didn't go so far as to say that this has been destroyed, obliterated, whatever it is. In fact, rather than that, he showed a recent test video that showed the capability of the weapon, and he showed exactly how they were able to target the facility. He said that they hit the intended aim points, and they are confident that the bombs exploded, but not going any further than that, expressing, again, confidence in the mission, extended praise for the men and women who were involved in this. He made a point of saying, in fact, that there was even women aviators as part of this mission, including it sounded as if on the B-2s as well. But beyond that, we didn't get a whole lot of specifics about exactly how they know. For instance, one big question that remains, President Trump yesterday at the summit, or the press conference at The Hague, saying that there were people who were on the ground that got eyes on the facility. That's one of the reasons they have confidence here. We still don't really know exactly who those individuals were. And one of the big questions, the chairman again saying that they believe this mission overall hitting their aim points was successful in that way, but we still don't really know a whole lot more about Natanz and about Isfahan, the other two sites that were hit, one by additional massive ordnance penetrators, the other by Tomahawks from the submarines. And notably, one of the reporters in here asked the secretary if he would vow to provide more information, and he did not do so, Jonathan.
Yeah, and Courtney, you're right to mention what the president said yesterday about having assets on the ground, raising some speculation, perhaps Israeli intelligence or something. He said something that perhaps he shouldn't have there. Is there any sense here, and I know they ducked and dodged a little bit, of a better timeline as to, are military officials beyond those that we just heard from at the podium telling you when we think we will have a better sense as to actually what transpired over the weekend?
No, we're not getting that at all. And every time he was asked about it, the chairman kept saying, look, this is an intelligence community product, and we are the recipient of the information once they have it complete. Keep in mind, from the very beginning, General Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Sunday morning, stood here and said it can take time. It can be days or even weeks before they have a full picture here. So this preliminary report that was compiled by the Defense Intelligence Agency has repeatedly been described as such, as a preliminary look, an early look at what they knew about what happened primarily at Fordo. So all along, there's been an acknowledgement that this information could continue to evolve as more intelligence came in. We didn't get a whole lot of additional detail about additional intelligence that they've gathered since the strikes. Instead, we got a pretty comprehensive lesson on how the penetrator works, this massive bomb works. But as far as the actual details about what it did, it seems to be more of an assumption based off the fact that the bombs went in at the correct angle. They struck the exact aim points they were intended to, based off what appears to be years of gathering evidence and intelligence on the facility itself. They believe that based off of those factors, this would have been successful, but they didn't provide the actual evidence of whether they've gathered information. For instance, eyes on, people actually seeing that the facility itself underground, seeing that it was destroyed. There was one other notable thing that the chairman said. He said that he believes that the bombs destroyed critical hardware. So, you know, another notable mention from the chairman.
Courtney, I just wanted to thank you so much for all your reporting. I just wanted to ask you about other possible sites in terms of where centrifuges might be held, and then if you could talk briefly about the Defense Intelligence Agency, just sort of who runs it, whether it's military officials or political appointees.
Yeah, and that was another thing that several reporters pressed the secretary on, is this idea that maybe some of the highly enriched uranium may have been moved out of Fordo, moved to other locations in advance of the strike. He was dismissive of that and said he hadn't seen any intelligence to prove that. But of course, we've seen that there are satellite imagery and the photos that appear to show trucks taking things out of Fordo several days before the U.S. military strike. So that was another thing that we didn't get a specific answer to. And just, you know, for our viewers, the highly enriched uranium, why that's such a big deal here is that is what creates, is the fissile material that can create a nuclear weapon. You need the highly enriched uranium. It's almost like the fuse for any kind of a nuclear weapon. It's a critical part of that. As far as the Defense Intelligence Agency, it is it is an arm of the Pentagon. It's run by a 3-star general. It's not a political agency. They are intended to, in some cases, aggregate or gather information from other places and provide an analysis. That was one thing that we actually heard from the secretary today. He said that this initial report out of DIA was essentially a post-strike report, and that it can provide intelligence about whether the U.S. military has to do follow-on strikes, whether in fact they were able to destroy something to the extent that it is completely finished off, or it might need follow-on military action here. That was something that we hadn't heard about that to this point yet, David.